Hey guys, Pete here. This will be a Westworld Season 3 Episode 2 trailer breakdown. Actually, this trailer is one of those in the weeks ahead promos that HBO's been doing after the premieres of their shows lately, so some of the scenes are likely from later in the season, but either way, I will break all of these down scene by scene and we'll talk about what might be happening in Episode 2. The title is The Winter Line, which was a series of German and Italian military fortifications in Italy. We saw Maeve in Warworld in the post-credits scene in episode 1, and this title would suggest we'll be spending some more time there with her. Before we get into it, this is your spoiler warning. This video will contain spoilers for everything that's happened in Westworld to this point, including trailers that are out there that came out before the season. If you're not caught up, this video won't be for you and you have officially been warned. The trailer opens with some night shots. Whoever the Hale is in host Charlotte's body is looking at the Delos headquarters building. This is the City of Arts and Science building in Valencia, Spain. But in the background, the Westworld creators have pasted in the San Francisco skyline. So in the 2058 world where the story takes place, she's at the Delos building, and that is in San Francisco, California. It's a transition shot of a drop of blood falling into water. It's coming off of someone's hand. It's not clear who the hand belongs to. That cuts to a shot of Dolores and Host Hale in what looks like the house that Arnold built outside the park where season 2 came to an end. There's a voiceover conversation. Charlotte says, "Where am I? Who am I?" Dolores responds, "Let me show you who you need to pretend to be." While they talk, we see Hale looking into a handheld mirror as Dolores looks on. Unfortunately, there aren't any clues about which host consciousness is inside the Hale body at this point. The takeaway here is that whoever it is, that host will have to adapt to playing this role. The voiceover continues. Charlotte says, "Where am I going?" And Dolores answers, "Home." We see Hale walking down a hall in a different location. And based on what's said and what's going on, it could be her returning to her own house or her apartment. And that transitions to a shot of a child laying in bed. My first thought was this was Charlie, Arnold's son. But the more I look at it, the more I wonder if Hale didn't have a son of her own. We really don't know anything about her life outside of her job, outside of the park. This is obviously a different actor than the kid that played Charlie, which that guy would be too old to play this role again at that point, so that's not any kind of conclusive evidence. But I'm leaning towards it making more sense that Charlotte has a son of her own rather than being another Charlie flashback. Let me know in the comments who you think it is, because it's a mystery at this point. After that, we see the man in black who appears to be going through some shit. He's fully clothed, submerged in a bathtub with a gun in his hand. He rolls out onto the floor, and it definitely feels connected to his wife, Juliet. Remember, she overdosed, and he found her in the overflowing tub when she died. Later in the trailer, we see him walking around with those same clothes and the same gun in his hand, and it's inside his own house. He fires a bullet into a mirror and generally looks like he isn't holding up well after killing his own daughter, Emily, inside the park at the end of season 2. In other trailers, we've seen him in a different location with Dolores, which it almost looks like a clinical setting. And since there's none of that here, I'm really not going to go down that rabbit hole at this time. We see that Bernard has made it back to the park. It's destroyed. This location was actually burnt down in the California wildfires last year. So these shots look pretty interesting. He's just making his way through the park. I mentioned in my breakdown video of the first episode that it's not likely that they'll be opening Westworld back up, even though the other parks are still operational. We hear Hale say, "Why did you bring him back?" And Dolores answers, "We all have our role to play." I wish I could say that this gives us a better idea of who is in Hale's body, but it really doesn't. We assume that she's talking about Bernard since we're looking at Bernard, but I can't think of any consciousness that would be more or less interested in Bernard being brought back, so there's that. As he's talking, we see Caleb and Dolores in the overpass where episode 1 ended. As he's trying to keep her alive, we see police lights in the distance sort of lighting up the tunnel. Inside the park, Bernard says, "Dolores, I don't know what she's planning, but I can't stop her, not alone." We see that he's talking to Stubbs, who replies, "Maeve, you came back from Maeve." So Bernard and Stubbs are going after Maeve, who's in Warworld. There's a shot of them walking with drone hosts in the background. That cuts to Maeve standing in the middle of a chaotic scene inside of Warworld, and she's frozen all the hosts around her like we saw her be able to do. We see her walk away from the scene. Then we see a shot of a car from a distance, which we've seen in other trailers, and this is probably her with Hector driving down the road. Then we see her wake up in what what looks like the real world. There's a shot of her walking with a print of one of those Rehoboam circles that they used to show the locations in the first episode behind her. We hear Vincent Cassell's voice in the voiceover, and we meet his character for the first time. He says, "I've waited many years for you and Dolores and the others to arrive." To which Maeve replies, "And who the fuck are you?" There's more than one conversation here based on what they're wearing. And there's a shot of Dolores with the pearls she smuggled out at the end of the season. One of them looks red, or maybe it's just got blood on it. I'm not exactly sure. If it is red, that would be interesting because we know that the hybrid pearls, the ones that were based off of humans, were actually printed red. He says, "She has 5 more of your kind under her control. They have a head start, and I suspect they're taking full advantage of it." She says, "Oh, they better have." This is probably the Sarek that Martin Connells mentioned was in control of Rehoboam before Dolores killed him and replaced him with a host copy. Liam Jr. said he couldn't control Rehoboam, which his father, Liam Sr., built. He said after his father died, his partner locked Liam out of the system, and all signs point to this being the guy who's in control of it. It's all a bit confusing. We can gather that Bernard and Stubbs get Maeve out of the park, but then it's hard to say how she ends up here. All the trailers have made it seem like she'll go head to head with Dolores, but it's hard to understand why she would side with the humans. Really, I think it makes more sense that all the remaining hosts will end up working together in one way or another by the end of things, but it appears that Maeve is buying whatever Sarek is selling, at least at first. She may have ulterior motives, there may be more going on than what we can tell, and we're just gonna have to wait and see. There's a couple more shots of Stubbs and Bernard in the park. We see Bernard sitting at a desk, and we watch as Stubbs overpowers a security guard. It's kind of interesting. In the background, we see that it looks like it's in medieval world. Like the hosts are all dressed in medieval clothing, and that seems to confirm another park. In the original Westworld movie, medieval world was another one of the parks, so that's a nice reference to add. In the voiceover, we hear Maeve say, "Who did she put inside you? Is that you in there, Teddy?" She's outside in the real world when we see her saying it, and it cuts to a shot of Hale with like blood on her arm to make it seem like she's saying it to her, but it seems like 2 different scenes edited together. She could be saying that to Hale, or it could be anybody else. There's a shot later with Martin. He's pointing a gun at someone. We know he's a host, so she could be talking to that character. Either way, this idea that Teddy might be inside doesn't seem to make any sense. They play a little bit fast and loose with the rules that they create themselves, so I'm not 100% sure how that's going to play out, but they've said that hosts that pass into the Sublime are gone. Like, they're not going to be coming back. So that would be a bad twist in my opinion. I mean, they have this overhead shot where we see Dolores spooning with the Hale host, and people had thought because of that it could be Teddy. I would be really disappointed, honestly. That was a good ending for Teddy's character, to put him into the Sublime, or, you know, the Valley Beyond. So I don't want to see him come back, even though I like the character. There's a couple of action shots. We see Maeve rolling up on a group of guys. It's hard to say what's going on. There's a car that speeds around the corner. Then we get a little bit of Caleb. We see him on a construction site up on one of the floors that's not finished. It looks like he's about to execute somebody with a bullet in the back of the head, like execution style. There's a shot of him, which is probably a flashback, but it looks like it's from his military service. He's running through a jungle or the woods. Then we have some voiceover where someone says, "Who are you?" And Caleb responds, "I'm with her." He says that to Liam, and we see Dolores come up for the closing shot of the trailer. As far as we know, Liam is under the impression that she's been taken care of, like taken out. So this might be a surprise. Beyond that, it's hard to say what's going on here, except for the fact that Caleb and Dolores are working together. She has the host Martin working with Liam, so it's not exactly clear here why she needs to reveal herself, but that's where the trailer ends. A lot of exciting looking stuff. I mean, we're going to get to see some time in War World. We got to find out that there's a medieval world setting. Not sure what they call it. It'll be fun to find out what the name of that one is and what's going on with that. Like I said, it's a little bit confusing on what Maeve's motivation is going to be. You know, she's had different drives and none of them seem to line up with helping the guy who owns the giant AI in the real world. So it's not clear what kind of a offer he's going to make to her. It's not clear here what's going on with the Man in Black, other than he's not doing very well. And I don't see anything that gives me answers to the questions I want to know, like who are those 5 pearls? So we'll have to wait and see. The Hale stuff looks like it is a flashback to before we see her in the boardroom boardroom in episode 1. It's possible that Dolores might be moving different pearls into the same host bodies, but I feel like it's probably the time just before we saw her, when Dolores first rebuilt her. There's a theory out there that Dolores has more copies of herself. I could kind of see that in the boardroom, that could have been Dolores's pearl, and then now she's putting somebody else in there to take her place. But considering how they like to play with timelines, it seems more likely that this is just going to be what came before that, how she slipped into Hale's life. But let me know in the comments what you think of the trailer, what you think is going to happen in this episode. I expect that it's going to be split between Dolores and Maeve in Warworld and her leaving, hopefully by the end of this episode. And then Dolores moving forward with Caleb and finding out what's up with their plans. So let me know what you think. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel. I'll be doing more Westworld videos throughout this season. Thanks for watching. I will talk to you soon.